Chai Elul is a very powerful day, as we well know. And we also know that the Friedrich Rebbe identified two sayings of Chassidim about what Chai Elul does for us at this time of the year. The Rebbe is going to analyze the difference between these two perspectives and illustrate to us that Chai Elul actually affects us in two completely different ways, as Elul itself affects us in two completely different ways. Wegen dem Tag von Chai Elul, die Yom von der Baal Shem Tov Chai Elul Shnas Nachas, und Yom von Alten Rebbe and Chai Elul Shnas Kehos. So with regards to Chai Elul, which is the birth dates of both the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, hat Chak Meich hat Mur gesagt in Siche v'zeh l'shoyna. There's a Siche in the Likutei Diburim where the Friedrich Rebbe says this. B'Chassidim is for an älter Chassidische Wort in zwei Aussprachen. There's a well-known old Chassidish adage about this time of the year, and there's two versions of how it goes. Aleph, the first version. Chai Elul is a tog, was hat gebracht und bringt Leben in Elul. Chai Elul is the day that brought and brings vitality into Elul. Beis, the second version of the statement is Chai Elul git a chayes in the avodah von ani l'doide v'doide. That Chai Elul injects vitality and energy into that particular avodah that we're supposed to be doing at this time of the year, which is I reach out to the Eibush and the Eibush reciprocates. Now, from them, was Chak Meich Admurot Ibegechaz Beiden Eschois. The fact that the Friedrich Rebbe mentioned both variations of this saying is moving that makes it clear as is einem beide isgehalten that both of them are relevant, both of them are accurate, both are authentic. And as in Yed Nusach is Da'aruf to the Gabed Zweiten, and each of these versions of the adage has an insight and perspective the other doesn't have, so you need both of them to get the full picture. V'oid, not only that, the fact that the Friedrich Rebbe presented them in the order in which he did, and not only that, but he specified this is version A and this is version B. Is move on as früher kommt in Chai Elul was Tag was hat gebracht und bringt Leben in Chai Elul in Elul. It's the first part of what this teaching is supposed to teach us. The first part of it is that the day of Chai Elul brings and brought vitality to Elul. And only after that do you graduate to the next, or you arrive at the next level, which is that Zweite Nusach in Chai Elul, the second concept about Chai Elul, represented in the second version, was git chayes in the avodah von ani l'doide v'doide li, that Chai Elul injects vitality and energy into the avodah of serving the Eibush in the way we do in Elul ani l'doide v'doide li. So die Shnuim zwischen die zwei Nuschois hanal seinen. So let's first identify what the real differences are between the two versions of what Chassidim used to say. Aleph, the first one emphasizes in Eshen Nusach is the Lashon Chai Elul in der Tag v'schule. The first one emphasizes the day. There's something about the day of Chai Elul that brings and brought Chayes to Elul. Mashenkin in Zweiten Nusach steht Chai Elul stam on der Goshet de Tag, whereas the second version doesn't mention the day of Chai Elul, just speaks about Chai Elul. That distinction is important. Beis, the second major difference is in Eshen Nusach hat gebracht und bringt Leben. The language of the first expression is that Chai Elul brought and brings energy to Elul, or life to Elul. Whereas the second version says, Chai Elul gives chayes. What's the difference between bringing and giving chayes? Now you're going to see there's actually two differences over here. Two things we're distinguishing. There are two distinctions. Bringt und zweitens git. The first expression spoke about bringing chayes. The second expression spoke about giving chayes. What's the difference? Second of all, base in the first version said brought and brings, past and present, od gebracht und bringt. And in zweiten Nusach is es no beloshen heve, git. Whereas the second expression only uses the present tense, it gives chayes into Elul. And the third distinction is gimel, neshen nusach haleben in Elul. The first spoke how Chai Elul gives life to Elul. Aber in zweiten Nusach, whereas the second version said, that's a very glaring distinction, that it gives vitality to the particular avodah we're supposed to be doing in Elul. Why those differences? These are not just differences in terms of language, these are fundamental differences in terms of what the message is of what Chai Elul is all about. Aleph, der Bita Chai Elul is der Tag vos chulei, is madgish diminyan azman. The first expression says, Chai Elul is the day. That means date, time, very important. So we're highlighting that this is a day, it's one of the days of the year. But it's a special day on the calendar. It's the day that brought and brings energy, life into Elul. Whereas if we just use the expression Chai Elul, we're not really focusing on the fact that it's a day on the calendar. Der Inhalt von dem Tag Rather, we're focusing on what the message, what the content, what the theme of the day is. In andere Wörter, let's say that in different words. In zwei Seinen Franz zwei Inyonim, the two concepts within time. Aleph etzem hazman, the actual time, the date, the day on the calendar. And Beis teichen hazman. Then there is the theme of what that day represents. And an easy example is Yom HaShabbos. Was in Zman is there Aleph eine von der Shivas Yemei HaShavua. So if I'm looking from a perspective of time, on the calendar, Shabbos is a day of the week on the calendar, like any other day of the week. Now, Zayndik dem Yom HaShvi, L'Chol Chabibin, is a Sayom Meyuchad. But because it is the seventh day, and every seventh in a system is very beloved, so therefore it's a special day. That is the time factor. Then, Beis, the Yom HaShvi Famoktin Sich Kedusha Shabbos. Then there is a thematic, a content, an essence of the day of Shabbos, which is different to every other day. It's a holy day. Holiness is something which is not confined to time or space. Now the Kedusha is meir in the Zman from Yom HaShvi. There is a Kedusha that exists, and that Kedusha radiates into this day, which is the day of Shabbos. That is the first and possibly, in a sense, the most important distinction between these two versions. The first version is telling us, because Chai Elul is a day on the calendar, that day has an influence over Elul. This is a special day in Elul that injects life into Elul. Whereas the second version is saying, no, it's not just that Chai Elul is a special day. You have to understand what Chai Elul is about. When you understand what Chai Elul is about, then you can appreciate what it contributes to Elul. Base, secondly, the Chelek Hanal is noch mehr boilet in dem dritten Shinei Hanal, Siv Base zwischen die zwei Nuschois. Probably the most obvious place where you see the distinction between these two versions is in the third distinction we drew, which was, in Elul. The first was, it brings life to Elul, which is also a time frame. Whereas the second one said that it gives life to the avoida. That's the toichen, that's the theme, that's the content of this time of the year. In ersten Nusach redt sich wegen dem Leben, was wird reingebracht in dem Zman von Chedesh Elul. The first version is saying there is life in this time of year thanks to Chai Elul. Whereas the second version is talking all about what the time of year is. What's the theme of this time of the year? What's the objective of this time of the year? It's to serve the Eibishter in a very unique way. And Chai Elul adds value to that. The Chais von Teichen von Chai Elul was geht Chais in einem Teichen von Chedesh Elul. In other words, we're saying that there's something core to what Chai Elul is that adds value to what is core to what Elul is. In der Avoide von Anila Doide B'Doide was es Asher Teves Elul, ab der Wort Elul atzmei wird doch nicht der Mond. So we're not focusing on the time represented by the name Elul, rather we're focusing in the second version on the theme, which is the Avoide of Elul, and Chai Elul stimulates that Avoide. And then going back to the middle distinction we made, Gimel, Oich, Zweite Shinanal bringt, oder geht, the difference between bringing Chayes or giving Chayes is a Chilek Ikri. It's actually a fundamental difference, because bringt HaLeben weist, as the Leben Gufo, if I'm bringing life, that means the life already exists somewhere, and I'm bringing it from there to this place. And the talk from Chai Elul is the Mamutz was bring them Leben Mimokim Acher in Elul, which means Chai Elul is the conduit that facilitates bringing that Chayes that exists into this space called Elul. Whereas if we say Chai Elul gives life to Elul, that means Chai Elul has within itself life, doesn't have to bring from elsewhere, has within itself a contribution to make to the month of Elul or to the Avodah of Elul. What does that mean? To get to understand that, we need to identify that there are two dynamics in Elul, and they're even in a sense contrary to each other. There are two things we identify about Elul. First of all, the most obvious, that the whole thrust of how we serve the Eibishter during Elul is that we have to take the initiative. Elul is Rosh Hashanah's kanal, ani ledoidi v'doidili. Früher kommt ani ledoidi avodah sa'adam. As we know, Elul represents ani ledoidi first. There's human input. I have to reach out to the Eibishter. And then the Eibishter will respond, my beloved responds to me, and there'll be an awakening from above. Which means that what causes the Eibishter's input? Human endeavor. Need vi chodesh Nisan. Was in is Isus del Eila. That's the opposite of the month of Nisan, which is all about the Eibusha taking the initiative. V'lashon HaPasuk, as the pasuk relevant to Nisan goes, the reverse of Elul, doidi li, first, vani Eloi, free doidi li, und danach durch the Isus del Eila, vani Eloi. There, first the Eibusha awakens us, and then we respond. Here in Elul, first we invest, and then the Eibusha awakens. Not only that, the Alter Rebbe sagt in Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe says the response from the Eibusha doesn't happen during Elul. The revelation of divine energy, bringing the Eibusha into this world, is that does not happen in Elul. Our avodah in Elul activates the Eibusha's revelation in Tishrei, in Rosh Hashanah, after Elul. Because really, the core of Chodesh Elul is human endeavor, on the one hand. On the other hand, the Alter Rebbe says in the same Maimer, in Likutei Torah, that Elul is a special time on high. A time where the Eibusha reveals the 13 attributes of his compassion. And that is not activated by our efforts. That's something that is instigated from on high. And that's very clear from the metaphor that the Alter Rebbe uses, or the parable that the Alter Rebbe uses to illustrate this. Like a king who engages with people in the fields. Any person who wishes can go greet him, and he will greet them all with a happy face, and he'll smile at all of them. But even though Elul is all about human endeavor and human input and human initiative, doesn't matter. Even when we're doing things on our own steam, we actually need the Eibusha's assistance to be able to do things on our own steam. As Chazal tell us, Pasuk says, the Eibusha says, who preceded me, that I owe them anything. Meaning that even your avodah, I stimulated your avodah. That's what it means when we talk about the revelation of the divine attributes of mercy and Elul. That is the Eibusha's initial stimulus for us to be able to approach him with human endeavor. So Elul is paradoxical. On the one hand, it's all about our efforts. On the other hand, it's all about the Eibusha facilitating those efforts and initiating something that will allow us to do what we have to do. So even though Elul has both of these components, the one that is most glaring, because it is represented by the acronym of the letters of Elul, is human endeavor. Why is that? The explanation is the fact that the Eibusha shares with us his 13 attributes of mercy at this time of the year. That's because this is the time of year that Hashem has allocated for that purpose. There are various times during the year that are special times for various things. And any special time of the year is not created by human endeavor. That's the Eibusha's choice. Now, the Eibusha decided that the way the world works is that these times of the year should be special times. So likewise with regards to Elul, as the Ha'aras who give me the Sarachim b'Chodesh Elul is mitzadem, was Chodesh Elul is an Eis Ratzon L'mayla. The fact that the 13 attributes of mercy are exposed during Elul, that's because the Eibusha decided that Elul has to be a special time. Was Demelkeit the Melech Haris in Sadeh, a special time where the king goes out into the field. That's the timing. So the timing is the Eibusha's gift to us. But what is the essence and the objective of this month? And that essence and objective was allocated to this time. Is exactly the opposite. The objective of Elul is human input, that we should take the initiative, that we should do, that we should work. Therefore, what is represented in the name Elul? Anila doidi, and then v'doidili. Now that we understand the two components of Elul, we can understand why there are two versions of what is special about Chai Elul and how it enlivens this time of the year. Just like Elul on the whole has these two opposite themes. On the one hand, Hashem's awakening through his 13 attributes of mercy, and on the other, our actions and initiatives. Is that derech zeh, as even again, it's a Chai Elul, the same two themes apply in Chai Elul. As a Chai of Chai Elul bringt herein in Elul, is in beide Pratim Shaboy. The fact that Chai Elul brings life into Elul, it has to bring life into both of the components of what Elul is all about. So one of the things of Elul is this is a time of special contact from the Eibishter where he shares mercy with us. So Chai Elul has to add some vitality to that. And on sign, this is the avodah von Elul, and seeing as the theme of Elul is that we're supposed to do work to draw closer to Hashem, Chai Elul has to give life to that as well. The Tog von Chai Elul. So when I'm looking from the perspective of the date, the time of year, my letters from the Baal Shem Tov from Alter Rebbe, the birth dates of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, is like Yom Skul and it's mine for Neis Ratzim. Well, obviously that makes it into a special day, and special days are the Eibishter's choice. On the fire, Art is gebracht an einem Leben in the Meis Ratzim von Elul. So therefore, if the whole of Elul is a special time, and now there's the Eibishter decided this is going to be a special day in Elul, that's going to uplift and energize all of the specialness of this time. In the series von Elul was kommt mir meidem, it's to give me the Serachim, which means that what the Eibishter is gifting us with his 13 attributes of mercy at this time of the year is now upgraded, sped up, elevated. And then noch is Fran was Chai Elul mitzat Teichloi. Secondly, and that's why the Friedrich Rebbe puts them in this order, secondly, that's what Chai Elul brings to the theme and objective of Elul. And that is that Elul is a time of human investment, as Chassidus tells us. So then when you have the gift of Chassidus through the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, that gives life to the avodah that we're supposed to be doing in Chodesh Elul, reaching out to the Eibishter. As the avodah for Chodesh Elul is mitagor under Chayes, that now our avodah of reaching out, dedicating ourselves to the Eibishter, is in a completely different measure of enthusiasm and energy. The Chelek is mutgish in the all of that is reflected in the order in which the Friedrich Rebbe presented these two versions of what Chassidim used to say, and the nuanced differences, the three differences we identified between them. So firstly, the Friedrich Rebbe tells us that the first nusach has to be the first nusach. Because it describes the first thing of what Elul is all about, that the fact that the Eibishter allocated this time to radiate his 13 attributes of mercy into the world. Which then should stimulate us to actually put in the effort and reach out to Hashem. In the same way as Elul being allocated as a time of divine mercy is something Hashem chose to do. So the new energy and life that Chai Elul brings into that dimension of Elul, that happens because it's the day, because the Eibishter decided, not because of us. On the far state by the Loshen, der Tag was hat gebracht bringt Leben in Elul. That's why the expression there is, this is the day, because it's all about the fact that Hashem allocated this as a special day. And what does the day do? It brings life into the space. As is mutgish der Zman Chai Elul und der Tag Leben in Elul is the Tag Leben in Elul. So the first emphasis is it's a special time that the Eibishter allocated. And secondly, bring device can also shiv gimel as Leben kommt mokim macher. If you're bringing Chayes into Elul, that means the energy already exists somewhere, and you're creating a facility to bring it into the space. Von der Susa Deleda, where does it exist? In the Eibishter's initiative. It's not that the day is giving this energy, it's that the Eibishter decided to give the energy, therefore allocated the day. Chai Elul is not the Tag welcher bringt dem Leben. It's just that Chai Elul is the day that brings that energy into our space. Not only that, Gimel means mad geschlecht dem Avar, but we also talk in the past tense. Hat gebracht, it already happened. The energy was already allocated for the day or brought into the day. Because if I'm looking from the perspective of my efforts, then the Eibishter's inspiration precedes my effort. It came before my effort. Therefore, Hat gebracht, even before I got started, this energy was already brought into the space. And therefore, it's was kommt liflei und als ein Sinnes koech zu der Avodah. Not only is it that it chronologically it occurred before I started working, it's what empowered me to be able to work to serve the Eibishter. Whereas the second and the Friedrich Rebbe emphasizes, it's the second version. That's describing the enthusiasm and energy that Chai Elul brings into the theme and objective of what Elul is all about. In that service of I reach out to the Eibishter. That's energy that doesn't come because it's a special day. That becomes because of the theme of the day. What is Chai Elul all about? It's about introducing Hasidus into the world. Therefore, we use the expression, this is a day that gives of its own accord, because it has Hasidus, therefore it gives energy to the avodah that we're supposed to be doing at this time of the year. Because the theme, the content of Chai Elul empowers us to have this incredible chayas to do what the Eibusha wants, to reach out to Hashem. Same applies to the person. As a chayas was Chai Elul git in the avodah von ani ledoidi v'doidi li, the energy that Chai Elul gives into the avodah of I reach out to the Eibusha, that's something that doesn't appear in our lives as an inspiration from on high, but it's actually human effort and endeavor. It's something I have to do. I've actually got to reach this, find this, express this, apply this. And that leaves us with a lesson on both sides of this story. The lesson for us, it speaks to both things, both what the Eibusha gives us and what we have to do of our own. Any person who's just starting out on their spiritual journey, they're still holding at the Aleph of Elul. We tell them, don't worry. Chai Elul is a special day, and therefore there's already a whole lot of chayas, and there's already a whole lot of divine assistance, and you'll be fine. A person would say, a person would say, who am I that I could actually grasp and absorb the chayas, the energy of Elul? What's my connection to such an elevated day? I'm a simple Jew. We say, don't worry. Even if you're really very much in the starting blocks of serving the Eibusha, maybe you haven't even begun the avodah yet of Elul. So you think, listen, how are you going to bring energy and vitality to the service of Elul? You're not even doing the service of Elul yet. That's the first message. The message is, it's a special day. It allows us, by the Eibusha's initiative, it allows us to bring energy into Elul. In fact, not only that, it's past tense, it already happened. Chai Elul has already brought you a gift of chayes for Elul. Because of who you are, you have inherited from generations of predecessors of Jews the ability to have chayes and Elul. And therefore, because they built up a whole repository of Yiddishkeit, you already in the present have the chayes and Elul that you need. On the other hand, is but then equally there's a lesson for people who are at the top of the pile. It's not good enough for a person to say, it's Chai Elul, special day. They were just showering us with Yigimah Mitzvah Sarachimim, and he gave us this special day of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, and therefore we're going to fly. The lesson to that person is, it's not good enough just to accept what the Eibush has already given you. You've got to motivate, you've got to contribute, you've got to give, you've got to lean in, you've got to do. A great example of this is, when it comes to learning Torah, the Gemara tells us it's not good enough for a person to study, just to hear from his Rebbe. But to bring to Leben was to Leben is free designer, which would be the same of importing life into a place. So there's the teacher. The teacher has incredible wisdom and inspiration. I'm just going to draw on that. Now, you have to get to a point where you could learn on your own, come up with your own svaras, even explain on your own. Besides the fact that you repeat accurately what your Rebbe taught you, the goal is to apply the human mind to explain the reason and your perspective and your insight and your understanding of the Torah. Besides, to the extent that you even innovate insights into Torah, in exactly the same way as Chai Elul brings energy and vitality and life into the avodah we're doing to serve the Eibusha. The fact that the Friedrich Rebbe shared both of these perspectives, both versions of the statement publicly, and asked us to publicize them and print them, Is moving us means that both messages are relevant to every single Jew. Warum? Because even the person is right at the beginning of their avodah, and maybe they do need a little bit of a push. That person has to have the confidence and optimism to know eventually I'll get to the point that I'll be a source of chayes. Right now I'm a complete recipient. I don't even know how to begin. But you have to have the confidence that one day I'm going to be the source of chayes of Elul. And on the other hand, so when you're talking about people now who are well on their way and they've already invested in doing this avodah of ani ledoidi, not only are they doing the avodah, but they're even in a position that they're able to inject chayes into their avodah. They have to know, don't pat yourself on the back, don't get carried away. It's not your personal achievement. The fact that you're able to do these wonderful things in your own spiritual development is because Chai Elul is a gift from the Eibusha that the Eibusha gave us, a special day, a special time. Very much along the lines of the example we gave about Torah learning. But the Gemara tells that the Gemara tells a very famous story about Rabbi Akiva. When Moshe Rabbeinu heard the kind of things that Rabbi Akiva was teaching his students, and Moshe Rabbeinu didn't recognize what Rabbi Akiva was saying. So he felt weak, he felt terrible. So what eventually gave Moshe comfort? The students asked Rabbi Akiva, how do you know that this is true? So he said, that's because we received this as halacha from Moshe Rabbeinu. Then Moshe was settled. In other words, even those aspects of Torah that Rabbi Akiva innovated, which is the basis of the whole Torah Shabbal Peh in a sense. And they were real chidushim. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu did not recognize what they were saying. The fact is that the root, the source of it is Moshe Rabbeinu at Har Sinai. And so the lesson for us is we have to find a way to give chayas into our avodah, even if we're just starting out. And when we are at that stage that we're giving chayas and we're really growing and developing, not to become full of ourselves and recognize the koach comes from on high.